And now, Barbara, if the president were to invoke the Insurrection Act, I mean, this would be so unusual to see active duty troops sent to the streets of an American city. What could these troops do or not do if deployed?
Well, that's really the question at this hour. What are they planning to have them do? This is an elite force. These are paratroopers. They are prepared to conduct combat operations in Arctic areas. And of course, that brings up the issue of Greenland right now and the rising tensions there. There are a lot of questions about whether these forces might really actually be deployed to Greenland if the president was to decide to do that. But right now, the thinking is, of course, Minnesota. If you put combat troops on American streets, that is what they are trained to do. That is their expertise. So the question will be, what would be the precise mission, the precise job that they would be given? And would they actually be facing off against American citizens on American streets? Would they be facing off against local civilian law enforcement, the police department there, National Guard troops, if they are put on the streets? This is exactly why most defense secretaries over time have been very reluctant to recommend to the president invoking the Insurrection Act. And right now, we just don't know what President Trump plans to do.
John, the Insurrection Act has been invoked sparingly in history. It was invoked last during the Rodney King riots that killed dozens, saw widespread destruction. If President Trump uses it in Minneapolis, like he has threatened, what do you see as the implications?
Well, I'll tell you what, being a teenager in Southern California when that actually took place in the 90s, it was terrifying. But I will tell you, more importantly, it's unnecessary. I am disheartened by the level of darkness and malice with which this agency is being managed and driven, because it's not about immigration enforcement. This is about reality TV enforcement. If the administration really wanted to enforce the immigration laws on the books, all they have to do is look back at what the Obama administration did. We were very, very methodical about doing it. We actually did it in partnership with local law enforcement, not against local law enforcement. We didn't have to threaten criminal investigations or indictments against local leaders. We worked in partnership, and we actually did remove many more people than anyone in U.S. history. Whether you like it or not, whether you support it or not, we were effective in doing it. And we did it in partnership, not against. And we also worked alongside with Tom Homan, who's very, very aware that we are capable of doing this without destroying our local American cities.
Yeah, you're right. The Obama administration was under fire at one point from folks who support immigrants, immigrant rights activists calling President Obama the deporter-in-chief at one point. Barbara, you touched on this, that in addition to this potential active duty military deployment, there's word that the governor has put National Guard members also on standby and perhaps ready to respond to any big outbreak of kind of a clash that could escalate. Explain the difference here when we're talking active duty versus National Guard.
Well, I think what's happening in Minnesota right now is the governor is talking about activating the National Guard under his state authorities. So in other words, they would not be federalized. They would not be answering to DHS, the White House, or President Trump. They would be answering to the governor and conduct the operations and support that he orders them to. This would all be written out, if you will, in orders that the National Guard would receive from the governor. And Governor Walz is clearly not of the same, shall we say, of the same mind as DHS. I think that many people are looking at this, however, coming back full circle. Are you going to have the National Guard, which is aimed at preserving order, supporting civilian law enforcement, and not going against citizens on the streets? Are you going to have them essentially facing off against active duty U.S. military troops if President Trump was to decide to put them on the streets in Minnesota? That would be a very serious matter. I don't even think there's a time when this, in recently at least, when this sort of thing has happened.
And Rosa, what more are we learning about this new DOJ investigation into Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey? Again, this is according to two people familiar with the matter. What do we know, and what's the reaction?
Well, Mayor Frey made the rounds during the Sunday shows yesterday, Anna, and he says that he doesn't know, that he's not aware of the exact allegations that are alleged against him in this alleged criminal probe by the Trump Justice Department. But he believes that it's about him expressing his First Amendment rights, him standing up for his city, speaking out against ICE. And he says that that is something that should worry everyone, not just people here in Minnesota. Now, about that surge of ICE enforcement here in Minneapolis, DHS said over the weekend that this is the largest enforcement action in the agency's history. They wouldn't get into the exact numbers, but Mayor Frey says that there's about 3,000 federal agents in the city. And the other point that he wanted to make was that he says that this is not about safety, that it's not about decreasing crime here in the city and in this state. He says that it's about intimidation. And as for your question on the reaction, he said that he's not going to be intimidated. And Anna, based on the protests that we've seen here, the reaction from Minnesotans are not intimidated either. We've seen them in large numbers protesting in sub-zero temperatures, which is, difficult even to speak. And so people are not being deterred. The protesters that I talked to said that they're angry, they're upset. They feel that their state is being targeted and that they're going to do what they can to express their First Amendment rights against
Rosa Flores, thank you so much for bringing us that reporting and standing out in the cold for us all these minutes. Please go get warm. Vaughn, meanwhile, we understand Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche gave an update on the Renee Good shooting yesterday. What did we learn?
Right. There is no investigation at the federal level into the killing of Renee Good. I want to let you hear directly from Todd Blanche, who was in Minnesota, justifying the lack of an investigation. Take a listen.
What happened on that day has been reviewed by millions and millions of Americans because it was recorded on phones when it happened. Okay, the Department of Justice, our civil rights unit, we don't just go out and investigate every time an officer is forced to defend himself against somebody or putting his life in danger. We never do. We investigate when it's appropriate to investigate, and that is not the case here. It wasn't the case when it happened, and it's not the case today. If circumstances change, and there's something that we do need to investigate around that shooting or any other shooting, we will. But we are not going to bow to pressure.
Of course, Anna, this stands in stark contrast to the Trump's Department of Justice back in 2020, which at the federal level, the Federal Department of Justice did, in fact, investigate the death of George Floyd. And ultimately, that investigation for civil rights offenses led to the criminal convictions of 4 of those Minneapolis police officers. But as you just heard there from the Deputy Attorney General of this Department of Justice, that there is no investigation at this point in time.
Yeah, they've already concluded it was self-defense, he said. Vaughn Hilliard, thank you. John, what do you make of those comments from the Deputy AG?
I'm a little confused by them. Anytime a weapon is fired, discharged, there's going to be an investigation. So I think what's a little disingenuous is the implication that no investigation whatsoever is going to take place. I think it's also unfair to Miss Good and her family to just try to sweep this under the rug. But more beyond that, I think it's really disturbing because for months, many officers, many agents internally were worried about the use of excessive force and the fact that something like this tragic was going to happen. If we try to sweep this under the rug now, there's no telling how many more unnecessarily so lives will be taken.